Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Salinas, and I'm a marketing specialist here at Educate 360. Welcome to today's webinar, Accelerate Your Cloud Migration and Data Modernization, presented by our fantastic instructor, Dean Tilton. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. And without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Dean.
Great. Thanks, Mariella. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our session. What I'd like to do here is spend the next roughly half hour to go over some items related to migrating to the cloud, to help accelerate that migration. And to help out with that, I have some slides I'd like to present to us. So let me go ahead and share the screen and step us through those items. Also, along with that, I have some resources I'll be sharing as we go throughout these slides as well. So here, accelerate your cloud migration and data modernization. They begin here with a list of some challenges, and many of you all are acquainted with these, including rising costs, interruptions to the supply chain, if you work with contracts, security breaches. This past year, I've actually received 3 separate letters from 3 different organizations indicating a breach and doing monitoring. Talent shortages and increased labor costs. Well, of course, the cloud can help address many of these issues. I do know of one case where an individual, their company went from over 100 physical servers to just a few servers that they were managing due to virtualization. And now we can actually take that virtualization and host those solutions up in the cloud environment. Other concerns that they cite here, and by the way, this will address the 2 leading cloud providers, AWS, which currently has the greatest majority of market share, followed by Microsoft's Azure. So the first part will emphasize more with Azure, but I did want to add a few other items related to AWS, or you might be using both. Maybe you're a multi-cloud environment or looking to do multiple clouds, because they each have their strengths. Here they point out, just briefly here, that you can see there's 72% of industry's pace of transformation has accelerated as a result of the pandemic, but existing IT platforms prevent the agility that we need, or there's challenges related to making that adjustment. Case in point, to, let's say, increase the number of resources you have in your on-prem environment, you needed to acquire, let's say, a few more servers. Well, you got to get the purchase order, get approval, wait for them to arrive, to configure them, maybe partition, format those partitions, install the operating system, install the applications. That could take several days, maybe even weeks. But in a cloud environment, you can do that literally within minutes, spin up a server. By 2024, 70% says by 2024, 70% of the workloads will be on the cloud. But where do we start? So we have our servers, our physical servers on-prem. We'd like to move those up into the cloud. From a security standpoint, 93% of company networks can be penetrated by a cyber criminal. But security and compliance is resource intensive. If you've ever had to be involved in that, currently actually involved in that at this point, getting an organization up to speed as far as compliance with something known as NIST 800-171. So that requires a lot of security controls to be implemented. The great thing about the cloud is that they have already gone through the legwork to become compliant. So by hosting our resources up in the cloud, that's already taken care of for us. So a good percentage of those security controls are already addressed. And here, 63% of high growth companies use hybrid work models. So that's pretty common where some of our resources reside on-prem, that is on site, some hosted in the cloud. And it might be for security reasons. Maybe you can't yet entrust those resources up to a third party like AWS or Azure, though they're doing everything to try to garner your trust. I know some organizations may take their data and encrypt it first, then host it up into the cloud environment. So there's several stages we can go through in that migration process. Typically, you want to start. Now, of course, it depends upon the needs of your organization, but you may want to just kind of sample out the different cloud providers. They typically offer the same types of services, but some have certain advantages over others. Maybe for now, the bulk of our services will be hosted on-prem or on premises, but maybe we're gradually transitioning over. Uh, for example, one great service to begin with, because it's relatively easy and it's universal, are well, in Azure, it's called the storage service, and AWS is called S3 or simple storage service to begin hosting files. Also, you could, um, from there, once you gain some competence, begin to migrate other on-prem resources up into the cloud. For example, they show here our infrastructure as a service. So think of virtual networks, virtual machines. In AWS, they give it a different name. They call them virtual private networks, pretty much the same thing. Um, and in a bit, I'll give you a calculator to show you the potential cost savings you might be able to accrue, or maybe to be cloud native. Actually, that's there, where you can help more quickly facilitate the app development process. And they point out a few other items there as well. Higher productivity, integrate DevSecOps, which is become a little bit more popular in the last few years, where basically security is integrated from the very beginning and help free up time to focus on innovation and managed services. Increase platform performance and resiliency. Now, this is a little bit more of a feature we see with Azure over AWS, but if you're using something called availability zones, where basically you're taking your virtual machines and you're cloning it in another physical building, another data center, they can give you a service level agreement of 99.99% uptime. And there's various types. If you use solid state drives, if you're using availability sets, this case, availability zones, and the ability to recover the recovery time objective, 30 minutes. You can basically clone your resources, even entire sites, to other regions to help avoid or minimize the downtime in the event of some, let's say, type of catastrophe, like a hurricane comes through one particular region, or a tornado, or there's power outages in one region. You can have a clone in a separate region. Regions, by the way, in Azure are separated by at least 300 miles. To, in essence, promote that availability. That's a kind of a big buzzword with the cloud. Here with security and compliance, AWS has something called artifacts, which demonstrates their competency if you are having to adhere to certain regulatory compliance, maybe with HIPAA, maybe with Sarbanes-Oxley, maybe with you work or do contracts with the Department of Defense. and you're looking to become CMMC compliant or DFARS 7012, those apply to you. They have gone through the steps. In fact, you can check out the website FedRAMP and see which cloud service providers um, are listed on that site that the government has approved. In fact, actually, let me just go ahead and make the reference to that FedRAMP. Just do a search for that one. I'll give you actually some links here in just a bit. Again, that can be a really big deal, particularly if you're a smaller organization and may not have the competency and the skills or honestly, the time to research all of that, much less implement it. You can take advantage of basically paying that monthly fee for that cloud service and utilize their compliance. That's a big help. Agility and innovation says here, securely scale your team's productivity with potential productivity for developers by 50%. Now, it kind of depends upon what's being developed, but there are several tools that are available to help with for teams of developers. A big emphasis on automation and using things like infrastructure as code, which are basically these text files, usually of JSON or JavaScript object notation, where if you find yourself performing the same task repetitively, you can embody that, particularly with your infrastructure, you can embody that inside of these files called infrastructure as code. Now, by the way, you could also still do scripting. Both AWS and Azure support PowerShell, and you can write PowerShell scripts. Now, there are actually, there's a myriad of other, well, not that many, but there's several other popular programming languages that are also supported in those environments for development. Here, a list of some best practices, the cloud adoption framework. In fact, I have a link for that. In fact, let me go ahead and do this here. I'm going to go ahead and give you, let me go ahead and just cite that here so in case you want to take a look at it. The cloud adoption framework, I've already, for Azure, I have it listed right here, which can provide some guidance, getting started, strategies, plans, a migration guide, and just to provide some value here. Basically looking at and documenting best practices. Now, one thing though, and I do like knowing about best practices, but what might be a best practice in one organization might not be for another. So just, be sure to take it with a grain of salt, but it is good to know about them. And again, this one's specifically for Azure. Just a bit, I'll show you the one there for AWS. Future-proof with innovation. So they point out some of there's just so many different services, but one of this, and this is applicable, this is not specific to Microsoft, is something called Kubernetes. You might also hear it referred to as K8s. And the reason it's called K8s is because there are, you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters between that K and the S, K8s. But basically, it allows you to orchestrate containers. And talking about innovation, this has led to an entirely new model for deploying applications called microservices, where each container performs a single function, and you can quickly scale those containers using Kubernetes. Again, both Azure and AWS will have that. SQL managed instances. You know, what differentiates your organization from another is not that, you can install, let's say, SQL Server. I mean, it's pretty standard. What really differentiates your organization from the other is the tables, the stored procedures, um, the design of your structure of your data, what you're storing in there, the actual data. That's what's going to differentiate you from another organization. So organizations like Azure and AWS, they can do a lot of that grunt work for you. And you just through a web interface can then manage that data. Let's say maybe it's residing in Oracle or SQL Server, these managed instances. And you just use a web interface. You don't have to worry about the hardware. They take care of the hardware, securing it, allocating the resources. We just pay that monthly fee. Again, the emphasis there, understandably, on automation, perhaps with the Microsoft Power Platform. But as mentioned, there's others like our infrastructure as code, scripts, programming languages, and they're supported the popular ones like Java, Python, the .NET family of languages like C Sharp, Visual Basic .NET. And what's actually been around for quite a while, but is becoming more and more popular is adding intelligence to customer experiences through things like artificial intelligence and a subset of that called machine learning. This has actually been around since actually the 50s, um, but in more recent years, being able to take advantage of more sophisticated and compute resources, more sophisticated algorithms versus just simple if-then statements, where we can tailor the content based upon a variety of factors. Now, others include like translation services. This is basically just pointing out, hey, these are some of the services that become available to you that are kind of more on the kind of bleeding edge. Like I said, it's actually been around for a while, but now they're basically being made available to the masses through the cloud. And the ability to work with and integrate our on-prem environment with our online environment for a multi-cloud experience with Azure Arc and hybrid clouds. And I might also add there multi-cloud, where we're using more than one cloud service provider. So for example, with New Horizons, we use Azure for their virtual machines because you get some savings with being able to, in a sense, reuse, recycle your licenses, your Windows Server licenses, your on-prem licenses that can be used up in the cloud. And we use AWS for the storage. So that's pretty not uncommon. Now, here, I actually already have this up here, but let me give you the link to it. I'm just going to give you the next two links here. The pricing calculator and total cost of ownership. So it's like, what's this going to cost me if I transition up to the cloud? And the second or the next link here, how much could I potentially save? So with the pricing calculator, and by the way, Azure recently did an update where they alphabetize these. Um, so what you do, you could select a category. For example, let's say I want to add you just, pick a category you're interested in. Like let's say compute. I want to add a virtual machine. Then you would scroll down and then specify things like the region where it resides, the operating system, basically their Windows or Linux, the amount of compute capacity, and it's showing you how much you'd be charged per hour. So maybe I like here, 2 core, 3.5 gigs, or maybe let's say 8 core, 14 gigs. And you can see there the cost and some options there. If you like prepay, you can actually get some savings there and other options. So the other one here the total cost of ownership. And the idea behind this one, that's that most recent link there, is you basically define your workload. Now, your workload is basically going to mirror your on-prem environment, what you have on site. And so you'd specify the servers, the databases, the storage. Yeah, let me just yeah, actually they added one. I'll need to add a storage. I know they want you to have a storage there. And then you could adjust it. There's all kinds of settings. It gets pretty detailed. And then they project how much you could possibly save by moving from an on-prem environment to an online environment. So if you need some documentation, if you need some type of justification, your sales pitch to the owners of the organization, again, potential realized savings. So that's our pricing calculator for the cost of the services, the total cost of ownership for migrating. Now, I mentioned I also wanted to show you some here with AWS. AWS, they list here some of the phases of our migration. You're doing an assessment and maybe here participating in this during this time is just to kind of assess, is this something for me? And again, hopefully with some of these links I'm providing might help with making that decision, mobilizing those resources, and then doing the migration. Typically want to start small with a group that's has buy-in, that's eager to do this versus, forcing people to have to do it. Um, those tend to, you want to gain some wins to build some momentum. Um, there is a list of, it's now 6 pillars that make up what they call the well-architected framework. It's just a collection of best practices. This is the AWS equivalent of what I first posted there for that cloud adoption framework for Microsoft. This is the AWS well-architected framework. It provides guidelines for best practices in how to structure your cloud environment, just to reference that. Um, Also, some practical guidance, strategies, guides, perspectives. That is, let me give you that link here. Provides time-tested strategies, guides, and patterns. You're welcome to take a look at that. The other one I have here is getting started with something called the Migration Evaluator. Now, that does require that you submit a request, though. So the link for that one, if you're interested. Again, this one provides you some with AWS as well. And another one you might find it useful, the AWS Cloud Readiness Assessment. This is basically a series of questions to see how ready are you for transitioning up into the cloud. And so it asks a series of questions. For example, are you using the cloud to enable and shape your long-term business goals? Again, a series of questions along the categories of the business, people, governance, platform, security, and operations. So by responding, and by the way, you don't have to have an AWS account in order to answer these questions, but by responding to those, it can provide some feedback to help find out how ready are you to make that transition. I think that's quite a useful tool there. um, well, anyway, we wanted to basically leave the last few minutes here before we end our session related to any questions you might have. And by the way, let me temporarily go ahead and stop that and bring that back up. So if you did have any, feel free to submit them there in the chat window. Also, um, just to give you my contact information in case you do have a question, welcome to reach out. I do want to thank you for joining me for this time. Again, we'll just leave it here for the last few minutes for those who might have any questions. And I do appreciate your uh, giving us the time, this half hour here, to go over this topic. And thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll give them about a minute to throw some last minute questions. But again, if you guys need any more info on this topic, please do not be afraid to visit us at newhorizons.com. And if you missed out on any part of this session, we will be sharing a recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. So be on the lookout for that. Alrighty, I'll give us about like 30 more seconds, and if not, we can close it out for today. And it looks like we just have some thank you moments. And awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. Is this eligible for? Absolutely, yes, this is eligible for like PDUs for sure. If you report them in the PMA, I'm sorry, the PMI PDU calculator in your area, you can definitely throw this under ways of working, if I'm not mistaken. It is only a half a credit, so just to give you a heads up. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. It looks like we have a bunch of thank yous. So thank you all so much, Dean. And then thank you guys so much for attending today. And if you have any more questions, do not be afraid to reach out. Alrighty. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Bye.